So I just typed it out. But since like Tuesday and Thursday, I did kind of go over some potential like thought processes and like kind of hints for the homework that I feel it's like kind of redundant at this point to do the same. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to ask them. I mean, I still will probably cover maybe a couple of kind of hints, or just maybe I will just be redundant and kind of go over like word match, how I might break that down again. But yeah, I think that's probably about it. Hopefully it's either mostly questions or something. And if it's silence and I do cover a little more on like word match or anything of the homework, then I might just call it early. But I did grade and release. I think everyone gets an email when I like grade stuff. I'm pretty sure. Um, but all the week two stuff should be graded. I think it's likely that everyone has at least like one comment on something, whether it be a lab or a quiz or a homework. Um, and just because you got a comment, it's not like it means you like did poorly. Like a lot on the I think homework, a lot of people used if else statements for dice game, which is totally fine. But at that point in the course, we hadn't really covered if else. Well, I say really, I mean we didn't cover if else. So the homework could have been solved by not using an if else, right? Just using lists and then using like an operator on list, in particular count, which was asked on like question one of the lab. So that was kind of the intention with that. But I think the majority of people solved it with if else. Um, so I guess like I'm sorry for that. uh, I hope people didn't have to like look too far to find that since we didn't cover it. That wasn't the intention. Um, and I do have two people solve the homeworks before I actually release them, and both those people, friends of mine, so I told them to like what we'd covered, and so they solved it without an if else. So that's probably like some kind of a blind spot on our parts. But so I think for a lot of those two, that when I did see someone solve it with a if else dice game from homework two, I left like a comment that was like, "Oh, it's totally fine you did this, but here's another kind of potential way." So I think I left that comment on like probably over half the homeworks, just to let you know kind of like another way, which I did for homework one too, and I'll probably also do that for homework three. Um, because I know a lot of y'all too leave me comments like, I wanted to do this in a more concise way, but instead I did it like this. So if I can, kind of think of a more concise way, or if, I see you doing like an if else or making variables that you don't need, then I might comment like, hey, you probably don't need these, or you could do it this way and save a lot of like typing. So no worries. And I guess relatedly on that too, homework four and lab four should be going out soon. I think lab four will drop tonight. Um, but as I mentioned, there's two friends that I get to solve the problems. I'm waiting on actually both of them to get back to me on the homework. Because I do want to have like kind of another set of eyes and other people do it. One of them is like a novice. She took like this one course on it too, so I really like her getting to do it because then she can come back and be like, I didn't understand this, or like, how would I do it this way? Um, so if it's not tonight, then definitely tomorrow. Both of us will be dropping, but I think I can probably just go ahead and get the lab out tonight. All right, so on no match, let me pull up the instructions. Oh wait, word match. Oh, so no match as in word match though, right? Because I was like, wait, we don't have a no match function, do we? Um, So I'm going to assume it's word match. On word match, I've gotten to a point where I've created a variable for the number of letters in the list words that don't match the input word. Okay. When I try to print those words and the variable is only printing it for the last word in the list that matches the criteria, i.e. in a list of him, hum, for input ham, all of those have a no match variable equals 1. Correct, right. But only the last element, hum, is being printed when I call no match less than 1. So I get there's also a delay too, I think, from when I see your chat to when you hear me. I think it's like 30 seconds. I did dive into YouTube live and try to figure out how to like eliminate that because I don't want a delay. Um, yeah, but it says it's currently on none, so I apologize for that if it gets confusing. Yeah, so I guess I read all what you said and I think I do understand it, but also a clarification what you just said as well. Um, that you only need to print you can like print the first word. I'm actually gonna type that too. In the case of like ham, matching a list of ham. Yeah, so in this case, you can just print one of the values, and I think that people have also already submitted on that, and so since that was kind of ambiguous, I did look at some of them, and it's only for like the case where if it does match 3 in the list, then it just gives 1, which is also fine because that's kind of how the examples I provided did. So I would say you're totally fine to return all of them. Like you're definitely not going to get counted off. But I would say I guess the original expectation is just to print 1. So in your case with the no match, if it's just returning hum for ham, even though like him and hum are in there earlier, then that's totally fine. I would say don't worry about it. But yeah, I believe I understood the thing because I like the concept of the no match variable. I think I solved that way myself, where I kind of did like a letter by letter comparison, and then if it's like oh it's 1 letter off, no match becomes 1, and then if it's 2 or more letters off, the no match becomes 2 or more. Um, and then once no match is 2 or more, you can just like ignore it, right? Because then it's like a whole different word. Um, like ham matching his would be off by 2 because H or A and M doesn't match I and S, right? So no match is 2. So you can just throw out that word, which it sounds like you're doing, which is totally fine and good. But yeah, you don't have to worry about the case of where it like could match 3 letters in the list. So I think that depends on how. So I understand this concept of having a no match variable, but do you have like a list of no match variables then? Because I guess I understand I love also for the sake of learning, but um, sorry, let's say we have like no match equals 1. Can't type. Oh, really can't type. There we go. And then you said it only returns 1. So I guess I understand that you have a single no match thing that's an int, but I don't know what the rest of it is. And then let's say we have like a potential matching list. Like, we did a filter thing and we were able to determine that it's possible it matches, hum. What were these examples? Hum, him, and hum. And our word is ham. Right? So when you go through, you do some like iteration, right? For like whatever X and potential matching lists, start comparing them. Then I understand like no match would just be 1 for like hum, and then you go on. But I guess I don't know how you're storing no match. So one way you could do it is I guess have like a no match list, right? Um, and then you could do append no match. And so presumably once you loop through this list, you'll have like a list of the same size that either has like one or two or whatever. And then you could like iterate through this no match list and then do a check on like, no match x, where x is like 0 or 1 or whatever. If that's, 1 or yeah, less than or equal to 1, then you could, print whatever it is. So then you could like print no match list x out. Or no, so this would be actually, sorry, potential matching list. So you do that. I'm getting errors because I'm not actually coding it right. But you could do that. So you keep like another list that has a no match value, then you loop through it. I would do like a range way so you get the number. So then you could just index into the no match list, and if that value at that index is less than or equal to 1, then you could print that. And if you wanted to return, so right when we call return, this word, our whole function ends. So you couldn't return it like word at a time. You'd have to like have a list to return. So if you wanted it as like a list form instead of printing, um, then I guess if you were doing it this way, you'd have to make like a third list, right, of like return words. And then you could just append to that list the if statement we talked about earlier, and then you could just return this list. So that's like one way, if that makes sense. I feel like at this point too, I probably should have actually just kind of like coded it in this file, but yeah, I guess this also is kind of a nice related tangenty thing on if anyone is struggling with word match. Um, what I think helps and is kind of useful is so if you do have, I kind of hate my, yeah, I'm just gonna make a new list because I don't like my list names too big. Oh, before I dive into this, since interesting learning, I think in my mind I'd like variables to work like a table where I'm assigning no match values to him and hum. It sounds like it's a fluid concept over time when iterating through a list. Right, right. So if you do like a for loop, so if we have like counter equals 0, um, and then we do like for x in like word list. If x. So then like as we loop through this entire list, like counter will be continually increasing based on this. And then sometimes people do get into trouble by having like counter. Oh, I can't remove it there. They'll have like a different one here, like new counter. And then they'll do stuff with a new counter in here, and then every iteration of your for loop, um, new counter will get 0, right? Because the code goes through here, x in word list, so x is hum, new counter 0. If the length of hum 3 greater than 1, it is. So then we have this new counter 0 equals new counter, which is still 0 plus 1. So then, this new counter becomes 1. Then we go back to the top of the for, and then we're like, okay, x in word list, which is him. And then we do this again, new counter equals 0. So then we just kind of like forget about it, the previous new counter variable. Also in Python, it's like, which is totally different than I'd say like pretty much every other language, is like I have this list of words, right? And now I can just be like, oh, word list 5. And now my word list is an integer when it was a list. That's because Python is not strongly typed. It's not like a typed programming language. Because in other languages, you'd have to do things like this. Actually, you'd kind of have to do something like this. Right? So it's saying like, I want to make a list of strings. Here's what my variable's name is. Here's my list. And then, you have to do like int num equals 5. So then it's saying, hey, I want to make an integer variable of the value 5. But in Python and JavaScript, you can kind of just do whatever, which is, I don't know, good and bad. I do think Python is the best language by far for novice programmers. Research does support that, which is cool. And I also think if you're gonna learn JavaScript and you need to learn like a programming language uh, prior to like going into JavaScript, then I think Python's like the perfect fit. Mostly because it's easiness to learn compared to other languages, and the fact that it's not strongly typed, where you can just do the kind of wonky stuff like this, because that's what you can do in JavaScript. Also, I think, I mean, I'm sure there's other ones, but of popular languages, Python's like the only one that really cares about indentation. So if you ever get annoyed by that, that kind of goes away if you use other languages, right? Like I have to have like, the indentation there, but then other languages like this would be valid, basically, all in the same line. Um, does returning none have the ability to break loops? So like kind of. So if you return in a for loop, so if I have a function, um, yeah, I don't want anything, right? So if I have a function like this and I have, right, then if I have return none here, what do you think it'll do? Dramatic pause done. Um, test. So right, it goes, for x in range 5, print x, so we start at 0, hits this, none. It So when you say like break the for loop, I guess it kind of does. It basically says, hey, this function's done running. So in the sense of breaking the for loop, we don't run anything else. We don't like execute it again. And if we had like something over here or whatever, like it's not gonna hit that, right? Um, but it won't like get you out of the for loop and let you continue like here, right? Because it just leaves, or when you hit return, it like leaves the entire function. Um, but there is this break keyword that does exactly that. It like breaks loops, which I think it was, I don't know if OLI covered it. Actually. We def linked to it. Um, but I don't know if it covered it. Are you familiar with break? Like this one right here? Like the word break, I guess, in Python? That's weird. Not bad. The video is not bad. Let's see, you got break in here. Yeah. So with the break statement, we can stop the loop before it's looped through all the items. Um, which does exactly that. Yeah. So the break statement will like break you out of a loop. So for this instance, right, it's iterating through these list of fruits. Apple, prints apple, checks if it's equal to that, breaks it. We move on to banana, prints banana. Hey, does that equal banana? It does. So then break. And break basically says like, hey, let's go back up here. Well, actually, it doesn't say go back whoop, up there. It's breaks you out of the for loop, so it just says like continue on, which is not to be confused. I can't type there. With the continue keyword, but I think break is definitely useful. You and this homework, and probably honestly all the homeworks will do. Uh, I don't think break is ever like needed, but it definitely can be useful. But usually, not usually, but sometimes if you do feel like you need a break in here, then it's like you could potentially code things a different way. Like sometimes I'll see people use breaks, and then I'm like, oh, if you just kind of like flipped your if else condition, you maybe won't need a break. Or if you like, iterated over something else in your for loop, then you technically wouldn't need to use a break. Um, but I do think they're useful, and I've used them in practice, like, for actual code, for like software out there. But like I could actually see break being used for sure, for word match. It just kind of depends on how you code it. Like for instance, we were talking about like that no match variable, which is maybe why you asked this too. Um, if no match is two already, like if we're comparing the word like ham to testing, right? After we hit the second letter, we already know it's a break. So then we could just have that condition where it's like if no match, uh, greater than one, break, get us out of that for loop and save us from having to iterate over like, the remaining letters. I don't think you have to be too afraid of getting the loops to break. Um, so return obviously can get them to like break. Break statement definitely gets them to break. One thing I do see sometimes is people will be like, Michael 10. Actually, does this work in Python? Let me see. No. They'll do, I guess a while is maybe a little more better example, like while in less than 10, and we'll be like print. They'll do something like this, right? And it's like, oh, I set my while condition to 10, or under 10. Um, actually, this would be, yeah, right. And then they'll modify like something in their while condition, in the loop, and then they'll be like, oh, well, it starts at 0. I expect it to go, up to 10. But really, like you're tweaking it here, so then when it runs back up, it's like 15 is less than 10, which is false. So I think that can kind of break your loops if you're like modifying something in your loops, kind of like header. But also, I think print statements too, the best way to know if you're like breaking out of your loops or not. Like anytime, especially when like code's sent to me, I always like put it in my idle and then I just start adding print statements everywhere. Because sometimes it's like difficult, right, to understand code you didn't write. And so underneath like every while loop, I'm like in the while. And then if there's another for loop, I'll just do like, oh, in the for loop, just to kind of understand the execution of the code. So yeah, definitely. I think maybe like every office hour recitation, I've tried to like push the how much I love print statements. Because I would say that's like almost like a top like 3 goal of this course is like really trying to drive home like debugging skills, and I think Googling basically and like printing are huge. And comments. So that's kind of too while I've been showing like how to like break down a problem, right? And like my thought process. So I think comments are really great. And it's like, okay, well, like step one, we need like a list of words that's length or length plus one, right? And then step two, it's like loop through for that list, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like check if the letter of each word, like, matches. And then so, just kind of like breaking it down tells you like what you might need to use. Like, oh, I need a loop. Okay, well, it's probably a for loop. And then like check if these letters match. Oh, if. It's kind of useful. Oh, kind of also for number fun in the homework. Uh, Less people, but some also used if else statements for that, which is totally fine. But again, I think the intention for that was to use like range. I think like there's three parts of it. Like part one is just a basic range, and then part two I think it was a range like that with just two parameters, and then for part three it was doing like a range and then having like the step in there. Um, but a lot of people used if else for that too, which is fine. Um, I just don't want anyone to feel like, well, how like was I supposed to solve it without an if else? Um, and it was just about the range, which we'd covered that week. But that's fine. I think actually too, we're pretty much at the point where no kind of new like keywords will be introduced, just like ways to use them. So like this week is yeah, kind of about these like search and sorting algorithms, which a lot of times intro courses like make you kind of get into coding of these algorithms, which is like, oh, fine and dandy, but I don't think too useful. So I think um, the intention with like the homework for this coming week and the weeks, following, will be definitely more kind of practical. So like it's good to know binary search, for instance, um, and how it works. And I think it definitely lends itself to some computational thinking, and is useful. But I'm not gonna, you know, code binary search where you can only use like so and so, or like put some limit on it, or try to get it just basically re-implement it. No, definitely not. But maybe some certain concepts of it, like doing sorting in general or searching for something, is definitely there. Oh, also relatedly, so you'll see the quizzes kind of run out right here. So there's no quiz for the last 2 weeks, which is fine because I kind of like in an hour breakdown or like an hour by hour breakdown of the course, kind of devote like an hour of expected time to like quizzes or whatever. Um, and so now I have some kind of ideas for other material I'd like you to spend like an hour on in lieu of a quiz, and then submit something like very basic that's kind of like equivalent to a quiz. Honestly, probably easier. Um, but that will cover kind of an important topic that will be super useful for using JavaScript and PUI. And I'm pretty sure like the first one will be this concept of JSON. So yeah, I'll probably for like the quiz, quote unquote, right, for the last 2 weeks, I'll probably just give you a Python file and like ask you to slightly modify it just to get familiar with the concept and like maybe like literally read this page I'm on now or something. But you don't have to worry about that till you get there. But I just thought I'd mention that since there's no quizzes there. Recursion's fun. I actually saw a few people use, I don't know if they knew they were using it, but used like a recursive solution to one of the homework problems. And I thought that was really cool. And recursion's basically like when a function calls itself. But I don't want to dive into that. For the word match problems, I need to pick out words from the list that are equal to or greater by 1 in order to compare to my input. How do I assign that word from the list to an external variable? Let me type. Just needs to return one. Probably the first. All right, so we can do I have wordless? What? Oh, because I reran it. Whoop. So how do you assign that word from a list to an external variable? So if I have a word list like this, um, like my variable, then I mean, one way you could just is like index into it. So now this my var becomes, right, the word in the list. Also, if I'm like looping over, well, actually, this is like, right, a blank variable. So, right, it's not set to a word or anything. And then if I did for x in a word list, maybe if I want to do like if x is equal to him, then blank var should equal x, right? I run that, and now my external variable is equal to the word. Is that what you're asking? Good stuff. And don't forget if we have so then we can index into this just like we would a list. So word 2 would equal to space, right? So then maybe I want to iterate through. So for x and word list, of course. For x and word list, for x in the range of that word, then we can do like right, so then we can get a letter by letter basis. So then maybe we'd want to compare that to our word as well, right? I have a question on module 5. Could you go over the insertion sort function, last page of the module? I'm having some trouble tracing and following the variables used. Sure. Also, like with OLI, there could be totally a case that there's like a typo or something. So if you yeah, like I know someone actually asked on Piazza, I think it was a public question about a true or false thing. Um, and it was just like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a typo in OLI where like they meant C instead of D. Um, so I think this is the one in question. The following tracing activities will help you understand the written code. So true. Tracing through code is great, which is why, print statements are so helpful. The first activity below focuses on the inner while loop before the loop condition is checked. Okay. The index unsorted holds the index of the item next that is currently being considered to be eventually inserted in the correct place. It is important to observe how it changes the list so that the item to be inserted can be inserted in the correct place, and all the other orderings in the list are preserved. Right. Given the initial value for the variable items in I and next in the table, trace the while loop below by filling in the values for each of these variables at the end of each iteration. Oh, okay, I see what it's doing. So first thing I want to probably do is just go ahead and throw this in here. And then I'm just going to steal these values. Get it to print something just because. See if I get an error. Nope. All right. So also kind of a good way to check. Presumably, I think this one's like, well, it's done, right? Trace the while loop below by filling in the values for each of these. All right. So I guess it's when it's done, maybe. So I'm gonna actually like walk through it. I just want these print statements too, in case I like get stuck. I will immediately have them, right? Also, maybe I can't figure it out and I need these print statements. I don't even know yet. Admittedly, it's been a little bit since I did insertion sort. All right, so we got this list. Also for anyone watching, these are kind of great. Oh, look, I was like on here recently, I think. So insertion sort is like a way to do to like sort a list. Yeah, that's not actually as helpful as I thought. These kind of things are great. All right, so this is like every kind of execution. So it like looks through this list. And you want it sorted, so you want it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So it looks through. It's like, okay, we have this list. Now we have 3. So it kind of like checks each one of these, and it's like, hey, is 4 less than 3? No, it's not. So we need to move this one. So it moves it, and then it does the same. It's like, oh, okay, this is 3 is fine. 4 is fine, checks out, and then it gets to the 2, and it's like, whoa, 2's out of place. So actually I know everything before it's not good. Let's move that 2. So then it loops through again. Is 2 less than 3? Yep. 3 less than 4, 4 less than 10. Okay, 10 less than 12. Yep. Oh, we're actually good on that one. It kind of does the same thing, right? So that's just a quick overview. But let me pull this back up. All right, so 3 greater than 0, yep, and items, so 3 minus 1 is 2, so 0, 1, 2, while 7, and while 7 is greater than -1, which it is, do this, items I, so items 3, yeah, I'm like already hating doing this without print statements, items 3, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, so K becomes that, and items I, so it becomes items 2, which is 7. So we're just like kind of swapping those, right? And then I, so it's 2. Do we ever change next in this? Are you really just gonna be -1 the whole time? Oh, I guess in the snippet, okay. Oh, so yeah, presumably we just always keep incrementing that. So for this one, I just went ahead and threw in -1s for next, right? Because in this tiny code block, we don't modify next. And I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like totally broken. I did do a Q&A on this course before we released it though. And then obviously I keeps being incremented right here. So, I equals I, which is 3 at the time, minus 1's 2. So I went ahead and fill that in. Yeah, but what that is doing there, uh, don't click that. Looks like it's trying to swap these positions. So let's see if it is. Um, oh, because this is at the end of our while loop. Why didn't throw these in there? Whoop. I was like so confused. I was like, how come we only see a single print? Look at me getting bit by the indentation, y'all. I also kind of like doing like just to kind of know we're done, right? Because we're gonna have what, at least 3, 4 prints. Yeah, I feel like it's supposed to have this bit because without it, we're just like totally butchering that list, right? We are definitely not sorting it. Um, we are just duplicating the letters as we go down. So maybe that's why you had the question, right? Um, I mean, I highly doubt it wants us to do this, right? Does it? God, I hope not. Oh, it does. Oh no. So I think what's this supposed to show you is like without inserting the element. Um, there's nothing I'm looking at. I like don't like this. I would have liked the while loop when you do this because that's like the logic of the insertion sort, right? So this is like the meat of it. And so I think this question was just trying to show you like, hey, if you're not inserting this element back, watch how this list changes. Um, which maybe some other questions on the page get at, but I kind of hate that. Or maybe this is actually getting you to do the whole thing, which is fine. But yeah, that being said, I don't like this question now that I'm looking at it. So thank you for bringing it up. So yeah, presumably these are just going to be the answers. And so what it would do if we had this part, right, which is like super crucial to the while, and actually the logic of insertion sort, right, because we're changing it right here, right, Adam's I, and then we de-increment it, or yeah. So we, reduce by 1, and then we set that one to next. So then we still have the same kind of variables that we're moving around, but without doing this like kind of insert back in, then we're just getting these, where it's looking at our 0, 1, 2, 3, it's putting in 7, and we're not doing an insert, so then we just lose -1, right? And then it's decremented, so then it's looking at the 7, looks at the 4, and swaps it. Yeah, so it just kind of gets confusing almost if you don't have this insert next element. The for loop is in within is maybe needed to run it. Yeah, I mean that definitely gives us the next. So like for the next to actually update like it should, the 4 is needed. So if items equals next included, it would have just swapped to 7 until it reaches the end. Yeah. So then it just keeps running the while, right? And it doesn't actually change next. And so yeah, it would just keep pushing it back. So we're trying to get this -1, so then it would just loop down, down, down. Because next is always 1. So this is like where it's doing the comparison, um, saying like, hey, since 7's greater than -1, let's do the swap logic. So now -1's down here. Then it's like, okay, 4 greater than -1. Let's do the swap logic. Then finally it's at this spot, and it's like, hey, 3 greater than -1. Boom. And then it goes back to the 4, and next becomes the next unsorted item. Which I think hopefully maybe this one gets at the full logic of it. Yeah, I mean, I get kind of what this question's doing, but I don't know. I think if you wanted to get it kind of like what it was trying to get at, that this is almost needed, or else it just kind of like causes confusion. But yeah, if the like you said, if items I equals next is included, then we are able to insert this number back, and it'll cause it to keep moving as we decrement I, and that's kind of what this comparison is doing, right? If that made sense. Yeah, no problem. And again, anytime um, these aren't like graded. I think they're like super helpful for learning though. But if you do get stuck on one, definitely feel free to post like you did in office hours or Piazza on or anything. And sometimes there's the case where, it's like you hit faults and it's like, well, it says it's wrong, but like I think it should be. Actually, was this the one? I think this was the one actually that got brought up on Piazza where they're like, oh no, it's false, but then it says it's like incorrect, but really false is the answer for this one because I think they meant C here instead of D. So there's definitely a possibility for errors, which is also why I kind of grade the quizzes by hand. I hope I've covered word match enough. I honestly feel like over the past 3 videos, I feel like you could like piece together what I've said and like basically write down the code I say or show and kind of get word match as well. Um, but again, I totally have like some blind spot, right? But I just don't want people tomorrow morning to be like, oh, I need some help on this, and it's like, but, people get busy, procrastinating stuff, so they can only do it at the last minute. But I just don't want someone to like submit that blank function and be like, oh, I had like so much trouble with it when they could like post it or came to me or something. So hopefully, but again, we still got 10 minutes if something comes up with word match or any other things on the homework. Hopefully, rock paper scissors was like kind of cool, right? It's a game. Making games are fun. Pastry boxes, had some of that similar logic to a previous homework question, maybe. And pizza order, kind of getting at a little bit of what might need to be done in word match. Which I think pizza order too is, especially if you're making, I think a lot with PUI and actually the MHCI program, you will do a lot of these kind of like high fidelity prototype mock-up things. Um, Especially kind of making like, like, oh, we made this like web app or we proposed this product or whatever. And so the interface does have this kind of like JavaScript backend. And you will want to demo to people and like run kind of like not studies on it, but like have user testing done on it. And so one of the cases, I mean, if you're doing like a pizza app or something, right? Um, and it's like type in an ingredient and it's like, some people might say onions, some people might say onions, and like you are gonna want to match that, right? If it's like valid, you're gonna want to match it in some way. And so that's kind of like the case there. Kind of also based on personal experience too. Um, but a lot of times too, I've been like demoing people's products for different capstones and whatnot. And then they're like, yeah, people will always type in like, if I ask like favorite color or like favorite primary color, like people are always going to type in like red or blue or whatever, right? And like just won't account for the cases where you like put a capital R on it. And then, you do that and you're like, oh, I'm hitting enter and nothing's working. And it's like, oh, actually, our code is like, kind of hard coded to look for like, red or, and then you can do something right. Or the case where it's like looking for like any input. So if like, X is your input, right? Then they might have code where it's like, hey, if the length of whatever they input's greater than 0, take them to the next page or whatever. And then, maybe I'm just like color, like, oh, my favorite color is color. So it's kind of some like almost like the tediousness or nuances of programming, but just wanted to get a little exposure to that. No, that's totally fine. So someone asked for questions on the homework. I made the provided function call smaller functions so I could keep track of the code. Do you mind that at this stage of the class? So I'm also going to type in case someone watches after the fact. But yeah, that's totally fine. So a lot of it is like, right, so for like test cases, it'll call, basically be like, hey, it's like assert, like I expect test to return, done, like print done, right? Um, so as long as like your function's there and it still returns the same thing, whatever's in your body for test could be like whatever, right? So I did run into that a couple times though. Some people like just delete the function headers or like change the names. So instead of like number fun, they'll make it like, I don't know, like NF. And then like all my test cases kind of fail for that. And I do test cases and also do kind of hand grading for all of it anyway, because I want to see some of the code you do. Um, but just like when it doesn't pass any of the test cases, but it's because of a typo, then I'm like, oh, then I have to like go in and change it, which is fine-ish because like I go in and look at the code anyway. But then I have to go back and run the test cases, and it kind of breaks the workflow down a little bit. So as long as basically the function header I give you stays the same, so any parameters is fine. You could change the parameter name technically as long as like the parameter is still there. Yeah, helper functions totally fine. Even print statements are fine. Some people comment out the print statements, some people leave them in. I guess I slightly prefer them commented out if they're like debugging ones, but if they're in at the same time, that doesn't bother me and doesn't like break the code or anything. So, and that's also like kind of a better practice to have technically to kind of break down big functions into helper functions and smaller ones. So that's totally fine. I think yeah, for like dice game, a lot of people just like copied and pasted in their dice roll function from the last homework and had that in their file and called it, which was fine and cool to see done. Not too picky. Some programming courses at CMU might be though. Oh, Towers of Hanoi. Recursion's fun. It's like there's some brain teasery kind of problems in there. But again, especially for these last two, like data structure is super important. But I think some of the typical intro to programming activities that are assigned for these units are more for I don't know, not as like practical. Like I don't want to give you like a brain teaser problem that you then have to code because it's just like why would you want to stump someone, right? You're trying to learn. So I always get frustrated by a lot of programming courses the way they approach these topics, although they are interesting. I think also too if you do, which is like a very nerdy Google joke thing that you will hopefully get once you do module 7. I'm pretty sure for the last two like quote unquote quizzes, right? Because there's no quizzes here, that you'll do a tiny activity again, like an hour or less, uh, for like probably Python dictionaries and JSON. Just in case you're wondering. But they'll be pretty straightforward. And I'll give you like some starter code and like sample code too to use it because I'm pretty sure both those topics will be used in PUI and with JavaScript programming. So just to kind of get your feet wet with it. Um, so it's not like a total shock when you have to do something with it in PUI. I think it's nice. And I think it's more kind of useful than, uh, just testing your knowledge on recursion again. So also kind of wanted to have like a interfaces in Python, like anything with a GUI is so garbage in my opinion. Like I wanted to have a homework where like I go ahead and make like a GUI for you and it has some functions and you have to like complete the functions and all. But just like interface stuff in Python, Python default, I mean there's some libraries for it, but default Python kind of GUIs are pretty bad in my opinion. Just like dated code that's not fun to work with. So I thought it just might cause more confusion. Oh, also, I will probably make an announcement tomorrow. I'm going to be out of town for the next 2 weeks for some conferences, and I have finally my schedule for the first conference. Um, and so I'm going to need to shift the office hours on, I'm pretty sure Tuesday. I might have to push them back or move them forward an hour. I forgot which one it is. But I'll send an announcement tomorrow saying, hey, the homeworks labs are out. Gonna update the page. That'll go here and publish that so you'll see it just with some more, useful resources. And then I'll also give an updated schedule, at least for next week. But they'll all be recorded. Although my audio quality might drop. I don't think I'll bring my mic with me. But hopefully I'll still be active on Piazza. Actually, I probably will be more active on Piazza because I'll just be like listening to talks all week. Yep, and also don't forget grades are out. Um, I left comments on some stuff. You can view comments by going to grades. And then, yeah, this little chat bubble here. No submission. So I left actually more useful stuff. If you got no comments, then your grade's probably like the max it could be for that assignment. Um, and I didn't really have anything too constructive to say, but you did a good job, right? So I don't really leave comments that would just be like nice work or good job, right? I try to make it actually have some like useful feedback. So don't feel bad if you didn't get any comments and your grade's like the max. It just means you did fine, right? And if you did get a comment, don't feel bad. Hopefully it was constructive. And as I said again, I think a lot of my comments were just like, oh, here's another potential way to solve the problem that, maybe didn't use an if else or whatever. So this should be there. And yep, unless there's anything else, I'm gonna sign off. I'll be on Piazza probably a few more hours tonight if something comes up. And then I think tomorrow afternoon I'll be pretty active. And probably around 10 a.m. EST tomorrow, I'll be on looking for any questions that might come in right before the homework. So I'll try to be active then too. But yeah, I hope everyone had a good weekend. Hope everyone's looking forward to week 4. Lab and homework coming up pretty soon. If not tonight, then definitely probably tomorrow by early afternoon. I might just go ahead and release the lab tonight, um, even without having my 2 friends do that. But yeah, good luck with everything. And yeah, email me or post on Piazza if you have a question. See ya.